New York City's Democrat, socialist, and arguably communist mayor-elect requested a meeting with President Trump. And now Zohran Mamdani has arrived in Washington, D.C. The president agreed to meet with him at the White House. And we could see quite a clash or a calm conversation, or maybe a combination of both. The president has repeatedly called Mamdani a communist, but says he wants him to succeed for the sake of New York City. I'm Harris Faulkner. You are in the Faulkner Focus. Mamdani posted a selfie this morning aboard his flight to D.C., and the White House press secretary weighed in yesterday on the face-to-face.
We have a communist coming to the White House because that's who the Democrat Party elected as the mayor of the largest city in the country. I think it's very telling, but I also think it speaks to the fact that President Trump is willing to meet with anyone and talk to anyone and to try to do what's right on behalf of the American people.
And I know you heard her. It's truly extraordinary. A self-described socialist coming into the seat of American capitalism. The sit-down comes after months of this.
The last thing we need is a communist. He's a total nut job.
That there is no borough that will be free from Trump's cruelty.
The Mamdani thing is it's a disaster waiting to happen.
This is not only how we stop Trump, it's how we stop the next one.
He's a communist. He's not a socialist, by the way. There's a big difference. He's a communist. He's down and dirty. He's a communist.
My administration would be Donald Trump's worst nightmare.
A very interesting backdrop for today's big event at the White House. The U.S. House has just passed a resolution denouncing socialism. Republicans say it sends a message straight into the Oval Office. Former White House press secretary Ari Fleischer is with me in moments. First, let's go to Jacqui Heinrich at the White House. Jacqui.
Harris, President Trump and the 34-year-old mayor-elect have traded harsh words, including in Mamdani's election victory speech, where he seemed to taunt the president. Just this morning, President Trump called that a dangerous statement, urging him to respect Washington, because if he does not, there isn't a chance he will succeed. But not everyone here is inviting Mamdani in with open arms.
Another big story is that last night President Trump announced that tomorrow he's going to be hosting a meeting with the New York City Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani. He calls him communist.
I might have a
stomach bug tomorrow about that.
And we might see President Trump greet him when he arrives here at the White House. So far, this Oval Office sit-down is closed to press, but often we see those events open up to cameras for a lengthy Q&A. Mamdani wants to talk about affordability with the president.
I know that for tens of thousands of New Yorkers, this meeting is between two very different candidates who they voted for the same reason. They wanted a leader who would take on the cost of living crisis that makes it impossible for working people to afford living in this city.
Mamdani posted to X, in the richest country on earth, 40% of New York City families can't afford weekly food costs, and food prices are up 33% over the past decade. It's time for a city government that puts affordability at the top of the agenda. But President Trump is among those who have chided Mamdani's promises, saying you can't pay for free buses, free childcare, and raise the minimum wage without raising taxes on corporations, which could cause a wealth exodus from the capitalism center of the world.
Well, I don't really know. He's got a different philosophy. He's a little bit different. I give him a lot of credit for the run. He did a successful run, and we all know that runs are not easy. But I think we'll get along fine.
So far, we don't know who else might join the meeting, except, of course, for President Trump, who has a new nickname for his guest, Commie Mamdani. Harris.
All right, Jacqui, thank you. A new piece in Politico frames the meeting this way. Mamdani's meeting with Trump comes with a power disadvantage, and here's part of it. Quote, the meeting sets the tone for the city's future. Mamdani can't afford Trump punishing the city or having his power clipped, but appeasing him or appearing to cow to him will not be well received by the supporters who propelled him into City Hall. In focus now, Ari Fleischer, former White House secretary and Fox News contributor. All right, so you're watching this and looking for what exactly, Ari? Because there are a lot of things at play here.
I'm looking for which Mamdani shows up. Is it going to be the strident Mamdani who on election night said, turn it up, whatever that meant? That was his advice to Donald Trump. I don't know what that means. Is it a practical Mamdani? Is it the Mamdani who reappointed the New York City police commissioner? Or is it going to be the ideologue fervent socialist whose views are distinctly out of touch with the American people? Most New Yorkers, despite him winning the election, are not socialists. And what's he going to say to Donald Trump about immigration? That will be what turns this into a Flashpoint Zelensky-style blow-up in the Oval Office. Or if he steers clear of that topic, will it be more like Donald Trump visiting with Kim Jong-un?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, a new op-ed on FoxNews.com on capitalist messages. Mamdani should hear a few of them at least. Look at this. Capitalism expands supply. Socialism rations it. Capitalism creates jobs. Socialism creates dependence. Mamdani was asked about his very ambitious promises and apparently doesn't care how they are just paid for. He just wants them to get done. Watch this.
I think that a lot of this is still a case to be made, whether it's the corporate tax or whether it's the personal income tax on those who make more than $1 million a year or more. I think that these are the clearest ways. I've also said that if there are other ways to raise this funding, the most important fact is that we fund it, not the question of how we do it, but that we do it.
Your reaction?
Well, that's a little bit of pragmatism on behalf of a bad idea. But at least he's being pragmatic in that sense. He's not married to just one type of tax increase. The problem is all those tax increases are going to be bad for the people of New York City. It's a pipe dream, and this is why I think he is an ideologue. He is a fervent socialist, and he's going to fail the people of New York City because he cannot bring down prices. He cannot bring down rent. If he freezes rent, he's going to create a shortage of housing, or even worse than New York City currently has. There are apartment buildings throughout Manhattan that are empty because landlords can't make money, and so they'd rather take the house off the market. This is the problem with socialism. It doesn't work, and it hurts the poor, the needy, and the middle class the most. The rich will be fine. They'll move out of New York City. They'll keep an apartment as a secondary residence. They'll visit there less than the mandatory 180 days a year that would trigger New York taxes.
Wow.
They'll get it figured out. It's the poor who will suffer the most.
Well, we mentioned that the House vote denouncing socialism has happened already, and here's a little bit of the debate before that vote passed.
Americans built New York City as a gateway for immigrants seeking a better life. We built it on freedom, self-reliance, and open markets, not on forced redistribution or centralized planning. The situation now extends to Seattle, where the mayor-elect has chosen to boycott Starbucks, a company founded in her own city. Is this what we want? A country where those who run our cities turn their backs on the very entrepreneurial spirit that made them thrive?
Well, how much does it matter that this has happened now in the House, that denouncement of socialism ahead of this meeting between President Trump and Mamdani?
I mean, I'm not a fan of these resolutions in the House. I think they have other priorities that are more in tune with our day-to-day needs. It is indicative how many Democrats vote for it, because it shows that socialism is not popular in the United States, despite New York having a socialist mayor and now Seattle having a socialist mayor. But look, here, if I'm the press covering this meeting, I know they're going to go for the flashpoint to Trump versus Mamdani, et cetera, and try to stir the pot. I'd ask a simple question of Mamdani. Do you believe that workers should control the means of production? Let him answer the classic Marxist definitional question.
Oh,
and
interesting.
if he says yes, as he has in the past indicated he does believe that, we really know we have an ideologue on our hands. If he hems and he haws and he tries to give some other answer, that would be an encouraging sign to me that the man has second thoughts about socialism and Marxism.
Real quickly, I can tell you my team has just informed me that top 4 ranking Democrats voted for this denouncement of socialism.
That's
Surprise
right.
or not?
I'm very surprised about that. I thought they would join ranks and just try to dismiss this vote.
All right. Ari Fleischer, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.